So there's one question that I have for all the panelists. And Keela, I'll start with you. What does Black History Month mean to you?
That's a great question. But first, let me say thank you, Eric, for having me back. Hey, everyone, it's good to be back with you all today. I would say Black history means to me is a reflection. When Carter G. Woodson created Black or Negro History Week 100 years ago, it was to recall what we had done over the last year and to celebrate our wins. So it was a little bit less of how we interpreted it today, where we kind of look at the grand span of what Black people have done in this nation and around the globe. But it's a reflection of what we have done, and it also propelling us what to or for what's more to come. So being able to see where we have been, see how much further we have to go, and to galvanize ourselves to reach where we want to go. I think the Black National Anthem, "Lift Every Voice and Sing," really encapsulates for me what Black History Month is about. Just showing what our legacy has been, and willing us, hoping us to be able to prosper in the future.
Great, thanks, Keela. Um, True. What does Black History Month mean?
No, and again, want to echo the sentiment of gratitude. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really, really excited about the opportunity to share the stage with these two incredible leading voices. Well, let me say three. I should include you in that as well, Eric. So these three incredible leading voices. So thank you for this opportunity. And I really can't help but not think about the reason and the purpose behind Black History Month, right? Going back to Carter G. Woodson founding it. And it's really about living out our full God-given potential to contribute to the greater good of ourselves, our families, our communities, and the nation. I mean, the opportunity was created for us, and it's not just about looking at the contributions of those in the past, but knowing that they created pathways and opportunities for us to do so much more. And it would be, in my opinion, a sad state of affairs not to take advantage of the doors that have been opened and the pathways that have been created by those that came before us, to not live out the fullness of the potential and opportunities that we've been given to tap into the greatness that's inside of us and how we contribute to pushing ourselves forward, and really recognizing that the gifts that we have are so that we can impact the lives of others. And knowing that Black history is American history. And so, how are we contributing to the greater good of this nation in the face of the adversity and the resilience and the opposition that we're up against? Because that's why those fights were fought. That's why those giants were slayed that came before us, is so that we could have the opportunities to live out the fullness of the potential that we all have. So for me, when I think about it, it's really about, what contributions are we prepared to make?
Thanks to perseverance and a call to action to own our opportunity and to make the most of it. That's a great perspective. Brian, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I want to echo my distinguished panel mates here, regarding the appreciation that I have for being a part of this panel, a part of this discussion. But also, I'm echoing them in many ways in terms of some of the things that they've highlighted regarding how Black History Month is a challenge and a call to action. But I'll take it from a couple of different angles. Two perspectives for me. One, as a simply as a Black man, I came from somewhere. And too often as a child and even a full grown adult, the only opportunities for discovery of where I came from were through my own volition and through my own searching and hard work. And so I believe, again, to echo the sentiments of my panel mates, Dr. Woodson's establishment of Negro History Week, later on becoming Black History Month, was an attempt of somewhat to provide a corrective to make the history that explains my existence more accessible and not just acquired through a brute assertion of will. So Black history more freely unclouds my existence as a Black man. Now, let me take it from another perspective as an American. Black History Month, as it has been mentioned by my panel mates, it is a way for America to understand itself, to better understand itself, because Black American history is American history. And when we all grow better acquainted with all stories from all perspectives and angles that have been lived, and not just the perspective and angle of the majority, we all become better informed. We all become more inspired, more empathetic to one another, and more united as a whole. So I believe we would gain incredible ground in the issues that we face as a country if we were less reluctant to tell and to study and to learn from all of our history. I believe that the success and the thriving of our country is very much tied to this commitment to Black history.
That's a great perspective. Owning your history, understanding your history gives you power. It gives you knowledge and expertise and empowerment to move forward. Great perspective. While I'm with you, Brian, on the topic of community engagement, how can professionals put civic engagement into practice right now?
Mm. Yeah, so that's a good question, Eric, and there's a lot of different angles. I think we would do well to first just start by making sure we're on the same sheet of music and playing from the same sheet of music by asking ourselves what is civic engagement. And so I believe that'll be helpful. So when we talk about civic engagement, what we, or at least what I'm speaking of, is we are talking about individual and collective actions designed to identify and address issues of public concern. Individual and collective actions designed to identify and address issues of public concern. So let's use a very simple paradigm for thinking about civic engagement. I am not just a president of Mission, Mississippi, but I'm a pastor. So when we're at church, we talk about this paradigm of how are we leveraging our time, talent, treasure, and I'm going to throw in ties. How are we leveraging time, talent, and treasure and ties in ways that will identify and address issues of public concern? So can professionals put so how can they put civic engagement into practice right now? By asking and acting on questions revolving around those four T's. How are we, or how am I investing my time, our time, in ways that will address issues of public concern? Mentoring, coaching, volunteering with organizations in the trenches, serving on nonprofit boards or serving in nonprofits and with nonprofits in other capacities. Second question, how am I, or how are we investing our talent in ways that will address issues of public concern? Offering my skills and my knowledge to and towards causes and people that will help us chip away at those issues of public concern. Maybe that looks like upgrading a local nonprofit's IT infrastructure at a discounted rate. Maybe that looks like hosting free training on media literacy and how to identify disinformation and how to identify misinformation in the news and in social media. So leveraging my talent. And then how am I leveraging my treasure in ways that will address issues of public concern? So what am I spending my money on, and how do I even view my money? Am I only defining investments in terms of the financial return that it brings to me? Or am I defining investments in terms of the people, activities, and organizations that I can contribute to financially that will address issues of public concern? So that looks like addressing issues or contributing to groups that are addressing issues regarding divisions and regarding how to better inform our public, and educational gaps that exist in our community, and safer streets, safer communities, inspired youth. You see, when we take our treasure to places like this, it will not change just our 401k status, and it probably won't change our 401k status often, but it is an investment in the collective improvement of a society that you and I and our 401ks must ultimately live in and exist in. So I think those kind of T's and question and asking personal questions around those T's are incredibly helpful. Now, let me say this last thing, Eric, as it relates to putting civic engagement into action and into practice right now. I think we have to, especially in this moment, resist the urge to give ourselves completely over to anger and anxiety, because both are real natural emotions that we feel in the human experience, but I believe that they're heightened right now in this particular cultural moment. You know, anger, if we give ourselves completely over to that, it will lead to engagement of some sorts, but it doesn't have any sustaining creative power. It specializes in only kind of identifying targets and then taking those targets out. So we need people with not just anger, but we need people with passion, which is a close cousin to anger, but it's not solely focused on opponents. It's focused on vision, vision of a brighter future for the collective. And so we need people engaging in the issues of public concern with passion because those people will bring creative ideas ultimately to the table. And then lastly, and I said lastly before, but I'm a preacher, so I got four lastlies. So no, this is my lastly. I mentioned resisting completely being overcome with anxiety. And what I mean by that is there's so much going on in the world that we can be overwhelmed to the point of paralysis. We feel so small in all of these complex issues that we're faced with. But if I just concentrate on what I can do, and couple that with your contribution, who in turn will couple that with another contribution, I may be able to move the ball 2 inches. But if we all are concentrating on moving the ball with our small contributions, we will move the ball much further or much farther than we ever imagined and ever dreamed that we could do. So whether that be just through voting or whether that be through long-term commitment to mentoring kids or financial investments, in nonprofits of choice, whatever it is, that collective contribution will move the ball. So we cannot lose hope, as Dr. or as Reverend Jackson said. We all have a part to play, and we must play it to the best of our ability.
Great, Ryan. So I'd like the ball now. I'm inspired to go to take my run at the ball. So please hand it off. I'm ready to go. Inspirational, clear, and concise. So I appreciate your perspective on that. Keela, over to you. So we talked about community engagement. Let's talk about community influence. So how do I, as an individual, influence government, being outside the government? And then how do I, as an individual, influence my sphere of influence to drive change?
Yeah, first of all, Brian, what a blueprint. Thank you for that. I mean, there's not too much really to be said beyond what Brian has said, but I will try to um to expand upon what he said. Using his blueprint of time, talent, and treasure, that is absolutely a way for us to influence the government from the outside, but also influence your area and your sphere of influence at your workplace, at your church, or your place of worship, wherever else that your feet may land, right? So as far as influencing the government, um, your time, you can be investing your time in making sure that you understand what is going on in the various levels of government that have an impact upon you, on your family, on your community. Because there's so many people that don't pay attention, and we are ill afford to not pay attention to what is going on, particularly on the closest level of government to you is where the most influence occurs. A lot of the time, especially now, the federal government sucks up a lot of the oxygen in the room, and that's just not something that we can allow ourselves to get distracted by what's going on at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue when there's stuff going on in Minneapolis, St. Paul, there's stuff going on in Lansing, there's stuff going on in Jackson, etc., that has a direct, real impact upon how we are able to feed our children, how we are able to educate our children, how we get to do a whole plethora of things. Whether or not we have clean water, that's something that we're dealing with here in Michigan, and my brothers and sisters in Mississippi are also dealing with as well. So we have to be able to pay attention, but not only pay attention, but also pay it forward, so that the folks who don't have or can't understand what's going on, they are informed. And some of the best, most trusted people to inform those are the folks that you know and you see every day. It's not me necessarily in my office, but it's the folks that you see each and every day, your next door neighbors, whomever. Your time, your talent, I kind of those dovetail together, but your treasure as well. Investing in the people that invest in you, right? Especially if you're talking about the government, we talk a lot about money in politics, but until we are able to correct the Supreme Court's decision in Citizens United and other laws around how people are able to run for office, we must invest in the people that are running for office. It is hard to become elected officials. It takes money to advertise, to print out mailers, to be able to go here and there and to talk to people on the ground about issues. And so you need to invest in those candidates who have articulated and shown that they have a care for you. And so that's very important, I believe. And on all levels, again, it doesn't take as much money to run for local office as it does for federal office, obviously, but it all takes money. And if we are able to, as Brian was saying, individually and particularly collectively, pool our money together to invest in those persons who want to represent us in the best way possible, that helps them along. And then what I always say is that voting as a part is a part of civic engagement, but it's not the whole of civic engagement. We have to make sure that we are holding these elected officials accountable. That is calling them, that is writing them, that is emailing them, that is showing up to these town halls, especially now because of what we are seeing at the federal level, because of what we are seeing too often at the state level. We need to make sure that we are articulating our concerns from our community to those people who are in power. This year is going to be a monster year as far as voting here in my state of Michigan, but across the country. Members of the House, members of the United States Senate are up for election or reelection, as long as a plethora of local and statewide races. I believe that right there in Minnesota, your governor is up for election. My governor is up for election here in Michigan as well. It is critical that we find out who are the people that are running for these offices and making sure that our communities are ready to vote, because you get one shot at it. And we have to make sure, particularly now, that we have people that are willing and able to hold the line as this federal government continues to encroach upon all types of civil rights that we thought we had secured in the 1950s and 60s that are eroding each and every day. I see it acutely here in my office as we are the front line here in the Great Lakes general region on things, all of the things coming from the federal government. And so we have to have leaders that will hold the line. And if you do not vote, somebody will be voting. And so we need to make sure that our communities are ready and prepared. As it pertains to inside of your cones of influence, and I'll try to be brief. First, let me just say on the record that I stand so much in solidarity with my brothers and sisters that work for the Target Corporation. One of my very good dear sisters works for Target, and I know that this last year for you all that are employees, particularly high level employees at Target, have been so, it has been hard for you. And those other spaces and places that have been rightly held to account for their failures to ensure that diversity, equity, inclusion are a part of the corporate fabric have been rightly put to task by our community. But at the same time, there are Black and Brown people that work there that are being asked to atone for what their companies do, which is is sometimes unfair, but it's relentless. And so I just want to hold space for our brothers and sisters who have had to bear the burden of this, as well as some of our federal government workers as well, who have had to um, remain in their jobs because of many factors while this federal government has gone off the rails. And sometimes we sweep with a broad brush about all people are doing crazy things in this time and place, but not understanding that individuals have to make individual choices about where they work to be able to take care of themselves and their families. So I just want to hold space for that. But at the same time, while we are here, we have a job to do. And the job is to use our influence to the best of our ability. That means putting the executives to task at your company for failing to uphold diversity and equity and inclusion. It is to say, I will not participate in things that are unethical, or that I believe that are against my ethics, because we have I have a line and you have crossed it. It is to be able to articulate this design, this item that we are creating will have the ability of being offensive to a community group, my community group, and making that clear to the executives or to whatever the decision tree is at your place of business, or even in your houses of worship. Because let us be clear that in too many of our houses of worship, people that attend said house of worship will also find discriminatory practices and policies. And we also have to hold our places, those houses of worship to account as well. So wherever your feet may land or wherever your body may land is can be a place of influence if you use it correctly. That is standing up and utilizing your voice, and it doesn't have to be individualized. It probably should be collective, right? Because as our voices gel together, as Brian articulated earlier, that is how we are able to move the needle. That is how we have always moved the needle. It was not just Rosa Parks sitting down; she was a catalyst, but it was the hundreds, if not thousands, of workers there in Montgomery who said, "I'm not riding the bus. I will walk 2, 5, 10 miles back and forth to my job to crush that system of oppression in the Montgomery bus." Of the bus paradigm. It was not just, Dr. King going to LBJ and saying we need the Voting Rights Act. It was the collective that were out there protesting and risking their lives, literally and figuratively, to get the Voting Rights Act passed. So we must work together as a collective to use our influence, whether it is pushing the government to be what they say that they are on paper, or pushing our corporate spaces and our workplaces to be who they want us to be. I will yield.
Thank you. Great perspective. So I took three key things from there. Well, one comment and two key points. One, I want to thank you for holding it down as a member of the government. It's not, I know it can be, it's challenging for us as individuals, but I know it's challenging for you on the grind on a daily basis, pushing things forward and ensuring there's opportunities and access for members of your constituencies within the state of Michigan. So we appreciate that. The second thing I would say is that the point that you made was, change requires sacrifice, collective sacrifice to move things forward. It's easy. It would have been easy to get on the bus. It's hard to walk. So what are we willing to sacrifice as a collective, strategically? I'll say strategically to move things forward. And the third piece I would say was a great point around holding space for the individual within the government, within organizations. Everyone doesn't have the ability to affect change at all levels, but people have to eat, right? And so being thoughtful and considerate and being there for people who are in spaces that are challenging is a great thing for us to all do as we think about our networks in our community. So thank you. I appreciate that. True. Question for you. So Keela got into it a little bit around the workplace. So what does civic engagement look like in the workplace?
No, thank you for that question, Eric. And, Keela, I really do thank you for making that point. I had conversations recently with some folks about that, specifically around Target and other places during my time in Minneapolis. I worked very closely with a lot of the leadership and executives at Target. And so I share in that sentiment is that we tend to paint an entire group, organization, and sometimes groups of people with the same broad brush because of the actions of a select few. And a lot of the people that are still there having to navigate that, it is so unfair to them when we just pile on and make it even more complicated for them when we need them to be at their best for those that are going to remain in these organizations and institutions because they're the change agents that will help course correct. And so I really, really appreciate you sharing that. And I'd be remiss if I didn't give flowers to Brian as well. Man, the time, talent, treasure, and tides. I won't forget that, brother. I just want to let you know I ain't gonna forget that piece too, right? But amazing framework that I think we could all benefit from. And you both use the term invest, and not just from a financial standpoint, but our time. Because when we spend our time, that is fleeting. If you spend your time on purchasing something, then that will be here today, gone tomorrow, right? It's very short term, but when it's almost like money, when you spend your money and say, okay, yeah, this is a nice pair of shoes, but then that's it. But when you invest your money, you expect long-term benefits from that, right? And I think the same thing applies to our time. And I think you both were very intentional about using the word and how we invest our time so that we can get long-term benefits from the way that we invest our time as well. I just wanted to point that out. And so when it comes to in the workplace, Eric, I think a lot of times, similar to what Keela was saying, we apply this pressure to people in the workplace to be activists, to serve as activists in the workplace. And that's not always realistic and it's not always possible, quite candidly. And I remember when I first arrived in Minnesota in 2020, uh, there was a lot of activism taking place. And although I was often viewed through the lens of being an activist, I was not necessarily out in the streets with a sign, with a megaphone, right? Creating unrest. But I did understand that based on my gifts and my talents and how I've been wired and the calling that's been placed on my life, I still had a responsibility to affect change. And I think when we think about applying pressure for people to be activists, we envision those signs and those megaphones and those protests, if you will. And there is a place for that, and we absolutely need that. We need that disruption so that the powers that be that are in place are uncomfortable because they want that to go away. But I also know that although activism can disrupt systems from the outside, we need people to be more of advocates on the inside, to advocate for change. And we all aren't going to show up the same way, and we are not expected to show up the same way, right? Brian has inspired me a little bit, so I'm gonna try and contain myself. But I read a quote somewhere that we're all different body parts of the same body, right? And so but if one part of the body is suffering, is in pain, is hurting in any way, it will affect the performance of the entire body. So, Eric, if you are out there being an arm, right, because that's the body part you represent, I need to do my part and be a knee or be an ankle or be a shoulder or be a foot, whatever that is, but it's not going to show up the same way. But unless I do my part, it is going to affect the performance of the entire body. It's going to affect the health of the entire body. So as the gifts that have been given to me, which is why I'm on this journey of building bridges across differences, it is to be the voice of advocacy and advocate for influence and changing systems from the inside. And so that could look like simply sponsoring someone who's part of an underrepresented population within that institution or that organization. That could look like speaking up if I notice that there are inconsistencies in policies and practices within that organization. And this takes courage, but having the courage to speak up. That could look like inconsistent when I see inconsistencies in the culture of the organization, just pointing it out and speaking up. I would often share the equity question with my leadership team when I was with the Timberwolves and the Lynx, and that equity question is say, hey, let's just run this thing through the filter of this equity question and say, hey, are there certain people groups who are going to benefit from this decision that we're about to make for others? Like the 7, 8 of us in this room, we're about to make a decision that's going to impact the lives of a lot of other people that aren't in this room. So is the decision that we are about to make going to have a more adverse effect on a specific people group, which will lack equity, or is it going to extend a benefit to any other specific people group? And I'm always a big believer of not making decisions about me without me. And are we including the voices of the people who are going to be affected the most by the decisions that we're making? So to answer your question, I think it really requires the courage, one, to understand, am I called to be an activist or am I called to be an advocate? Do my gifts and passions and callings align with one more than the other? And wherever I am, what space I'm in makes a difference. What season of my life I am in makes a difference in which one makes the most sense. I would suggest to us that Malcolm was an activist. He was he was outside making it very uncomfortable for the powers that be. Martin was an advocate. But the beauty of that is they needed each other. We needed them both because the advocate will get audience with those that are in positions of power. The activist probably will not. we talked about Martin getting that audience with LBJ. They were not about to invite Malcolm into that room to have that sit down, to have that conversation. So we needed them both. Martin knew his part. He had a role to play. He was a different part of the same body that needed to help heal and restore and repair the damaged collective body of those that were suffering the most at that time. And those were people that look like the faces that I'm looking at right now. And so it's really about understanding, getting in alignment with your assignment and doing the thing that you have been gifted and called to do and having the courage to do it.
Sorry, True. I was capturing all your bars in my notes here.
Cut it out, man.
Be
Cut
your
it out.
part and do your part. Don't make decisions about me without me, and get in alignment with your assignment. So great perspectives, True. If you could give me a quick response on this one as a follow-up, has that perspective changed with the landscape of D&I adjustments within our corporations? Does that activism look different now?
Just purely from a language standpoint, if I'm being honest, and I've been called into spaces to have conversations about this. And the answer, the question that I've found myself answering when I'm being called into these different organizations and institutions is essentially, and everyone is asking it a different way, but essentially the question is, True, where do we go from here? Like they've shut it down, right? We can't employ diversity, equity, and inclusion anymore. Where do we go from here? And my answer is those are the words, those are the language. That's the language. All right. At the end of the day, it's about impact and efficacy. And if not using those words are going to compromise the resources that you need to make an impact and to be effective, then don't feel compelled to use those words. That's not a hill I don't think it's worth dying on. Because at the end of the day, it will compromise your ability to do the work. So the what's changed, in my opinion, to answer that question, Eric, is simply maybe, and depending on who you are and where you sit, may only be the language, but the work cannot stop. Diversity, by definition, is the just difference, right? Diversity, by definition, is simply difference, and difference will always exist. And so, if we're saying we're going to abandon, right, the state of being different, that's an impossibility. And so we're going to say, okay, we're no longer going to help people of difference understand how to coexist and co-create solutions for the greater good. That's an impossibility, right? And it's not relegated to race. It's not relegated to gender. It's not relegated to sexual orientation. It's not relegated to political affiliation. It is the state of being different. That is just the definition of diversity. And so doing the work cannot, it's an impossibility that doing the work should be abandoned. When we can have two identical twins born from the same mom, they are going to have difference of some sort, whether it's their cognitive diversity, their experiential diversity, whatever the case may be. So what the answer to that question that I have distilled down wherever I go is, where do we go from here? We take the path of greatest impact, knowing full well it will not be the path of least resistance, but because the greatest impact, that word great, means that we're going to need to do things above and beyond what is considered normal. That's the definition of greatness: achievements and accomplishments above and beyond what is considered normal. And so, if we're going to do that, we should expect resistance and pushback. But whatever the path of greatest impact is for you, because ultimately, this work is about a greater cultural impact, a greater community impact, a greater social impact, and a greater economic impact. You cannot do any of those without embracing the principles of diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Great, thanks. I'm glad I asked that follow-up question. And to your definition of greatness, I'm seeing it here on this panel. So thank you all as we continue the conversation. So we have three more prepared questions, and then I'll transition to audience Q&A. The next question is for you, Brian. A lot of times we get excited or passionate about a subject and or a topic, and then it wanes. How do we sustain engagement long term?
Yeah, this question means probably the most to me, because oftentimes it's easy to, like you mentioned, start with that fire, but so much engagement and so many movements wane over time, and I think there's a couple of reasons why, Eric. So let's start, collectively, and then kind of narrow it down to individually. Collectively, we bring a lot of different passions to the table, a lot of different backgrounds and experiences together, and so that can be powerful. But to have sustaining power, there is no way that we can address all the challenges that ultimately plague us and shape what's going on around us. So to sustain some collective momentum, we must work collectively to rigorously choose carefully the causes we are going to address, streamline the definitions, and then hold fast to that smaller set of issues and definitions and remain married to the why as to why we chose those issues and we formulated those definitions. And if we remain committed to those small set of issues that we are working on collectively, that will help us with the purity test that we sometimes ensnare our progress with, because we have so many issues that we're trying to tackle, and those issues have a set of tests that we all have to collectively walk through, where we must align ourselves all on these secondary and tertiary issues for us to co-labor on this one big issue that we are all concerned with, and we end up getting tripped up in our progress based on all the secondary and tertiary issues that we're trying to tackle, when really there is some big issues that we all can collectively agree on that we're going to work together. And that leads me collectively to this next really important point that I feel like is vital, is that when you talk about collectively sustaining engagement, you're talking about doing that in a space and place where rage is heightened, where cynicism is heightened. And so we must work and labor incredibly hard to preserve spaces for mutual respect. Rage and cynicism can cause us to engage one another with smugness and rudeness when we don't perfectly align on all of the items, the secondary and tertiary issues, leading to ultimately some infringements on that respect. There's one author that wrote a great book that talks about common purpose and common respect. And one of the things that they say is that respect is a lot like oxygen in a room where nobody pays attention to it when it's available in abundance, but when we lose it, it's all we can think about. And I feel like collectively there are times in which we are suffocating in our efforts to sustain movements, because we are increasingly building these movements within cultures of disrespect and smugness and sarcasm that oftentimes derails the momentum and our ability to work together. So I feel like we have to sustain those things if we're going to work collectively. Now let me narrow it down to individually as it relates to sustaining engagement. I think a healthy exercise for us all is every once in a while sit down with the question, what are my values and my passions in the grand scheme of civic engagement, addressing issues of public concern? What are my values and my passions in the grand scheme of issues of public concern? And then after I sit down with that question and identify or re-identify my values and my passions, pull my wallet out or my budget out and pull my schedule out and my planner out and ask the question, how am I actually aligned with those values? So, what I'm saying is that in order to sustain momentum individually, we must do so with intentionality. And every once in a while, come back to what are my values? What are the things that I say I'm passionate about? And then ensure that there is real alignment in my day to day time, and my day to day treasure with those things that I say I value. Because here's the reality: value alignment leaks, because the tyranny of the urgent happens, family happens, the controversies of the day, social media, and we're all oftentimes slaves to the controversy of the day. They get us swept up. So now we're spending more time arguing about Bad Bunny than what's going on in my community. Now we're spending more time about what's happening with Herschel on a logo of a restaurant than what's happening in my community. And so value alignment can leak, and our time can be spent or start leaking out, and our energy and our effort and our finances can start leaking out into things that don't ultimately align with who we believe we are. And so I think it's a helpful exercise to step back from it all every once in a while and say, who am I? What am I passionate about? And where's my wallet saying that? And where is my time? Where is my schedule saying that to keep me from being swept off my target? So we need intentionality to not get lost in the daily whirlwinds, but I also think we need intentionality in order to sustain movements as it relates to being intentional about moments of pause, reflection, and replenishing. Because no movement can be sustained without Sabbath. No movement can be sustained without Sabbath. We are not robots. And if we don't stop, we will ultimately break. So we need intentionality in terms of ensuring our value alignment to pause, but we also need that pause just simply to recover and to restore. And so we need time away from all of the social media controversies. Every single day we're going to wake up to a new one. And so there needs to be a season where you say, I'm just not going to be involved in that. I'm going to turn off my phone. I'm going to step away from Facebook. I'm going to step away from Instagram and all the other stuff that's happening. I'm going to even step away for a season from the news so that I can just have a moment of replenishment and be recharged and restored so that I can continue in this engagement and I can continue in this work. And then the last thing I'll say about this individual level, as we think about how to build out for the long haul, I feel like that comes through community. And what I mean by that is that there are times in which we just fizzle out because we feel like we're on an island. And so I'm incredibly excited and incredibly just encouraged by TC Band and the work that you're doing because this gives us a larger community to find the necessary inspiration and replenishment that keeps all of us going. So I feel like it's important to find your tribe, to find people that are thinking about these issues, that are not content with status quo, right? That want to see the work happening, and then they are engaging in that work in healthy ways because you need those people to strengthen you, and I can guarantee you that those people need you to strengthen them. And so I think that community collaboration is what gives us more fuel and momentum and wind in the sail for us to sustain the movement. And so those are some things when I think about sustaining movements, those are some of the things that I think about collectively and individually, Eric.
Well, great perspectives, Brian. My three key takeaways there were from that Rhythm session. What your message were: one, you have to take care of yourself. If you're not taken care of, you can't take care of others long term. Two, it takes community to be successful over time to help build each other up. And three, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Right? Thank you, Keela. Follow up for you. With everything that's happening in the world, locally, regionally, globally, someone can feel overwhelmed. Like, I can't fix this, I can't fix that. There's only so much that I can do as an individual, and they feel like paralyzed with what they can do. Because I can't fix it, so I'm not going to do anything. What do you tell someone who feels like my $5 won't help, or my 30 minutes of volunteering won't help? What do you think? What do you tell someone who feels like they can't have impact? The problems are too big. I can't do anything to help.
Yeah, that's a that's a great question. Number one, I'll say yes, it is overwhelming. Like we don't need to like sugarcoat the situation. It's overwhelming. We are drinking out of a fire hose constantly, like all day, every day. So just my therapist said, you like you acknowledge what is, but then also work with what's in your control, right? So I told my staff, I said, we are going to plan for this year. We are not going to be caught off by surprise about what's coming this year. There will be things that we do not plan for, but we will be prepared for what we know is coming. So in that kind of a space, we can control what we can control. So if you can control that you can contribute $5, $20 to someone to help with their campaign, do that. If you can control writing a letter to your elected official saying, I do not agree with how you are doing X, you can control that. Because again, as you know, the second stanza of Lift Every Voice and Sing says, it says, we have come. It continues to say, we have come. So we are a collective. So you do your part, as Brian articulated. But if we collectively do our part, then we can move the ball forward. And I think, as Dr. King said, like everybody doesn't have to do everything, but everybody can do something. It's paraphrased. Go find the speech. You'll get it. So, but if we all do something, we can move the ball forward. If you are just teaching someone about the days that you can register to vote, who's on the ballot, and all the things, that can be your part. If you are sitting down with someone that is a government official or a person at a corporation that has a bullseye on them, I didn't mean that to be target. I meant like spotlight. Um, like, and just allowing them to vent or giving them a safe space to just drop their shoulders for a bit. That is a incredible part that you're doing, because this work can be hard. It can be challenging, and for too often for us, particularly a black of us, in some of these spaces, we are the only ones there, right? I mean, I talk with other so I'm the general counsel, for lack of a better term. I'm the general counsel for the Michigan Secretary of State's office. Of the people that I talk to around the country, there is not a black woman in that space. I'm not saying that there are no other black women that are general counsels for their Secretary of State's office, but I haven't met her yet. So, what does it look like to be a black woman sitting in this space with the fire hose directed at us here in Michigan constantly, right? Having to make legal decisions and suggestions to my colleagues here at this department on a daily, if not hourly basis. It looks different for me than it does for my colleague that sits in Minnesota. He's a great guy, but it's different for him, right? Because how people look at me as a top lawyer in this department looks different for me. So having somebody to hold space for me is extremely important for the work that I do every day between now and December 31st when our term ends, right? So being acknowledging the fact that overwhelming that this particular point in time is overwhelming is crucial, and being able to break it apart in smaller pieces to say I can't impeach nobody. I don't have the power to do that, right? I don't pass laws. I don't have any power to do that, but I can implore those who have the power to do that. And that is my part. So being very clear about what it is that you can do, what you're willing to sacrifice, either your time or your treasure, and actually doing that. And then encouraging the people within your sphere of influence, as I was talking about earlier, to also do their part. Because it is going to take all of us to get through this time of history that we're living through, as well as pushing the needle from whatever cone of influence that we need to push for them to do right by us, because there has never been a government that just decided on their own, or corporation or whatever. It was not out of the abundance of their heart that they decided to put DEI policies in place in the first place. You know what I'm saying? It's not a government that decided um, to have the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments to the U.S. Constitution. They didn't just up and decide that. We fought a full civil war about that. People died for this. Like, you understand what I'm saying? And so it is, but it was a part. Like, people played their part and was able to push that forward. So we have to be reminded that um, there's always a space for us. I really appreciated, Brian, what you were saying earlier. And as an activist, I mean, I participated with the NAACP since I was 19 years old. I am no longer 19. I won't tell you how old I am, but I just got a little bit older on Saturday. And so between them and now, my role changed, right? So I was an activist, but now I'm a lawyer. So I may not be on the front line. I think actually, True, you were talking a little bit about this. I'm not on the front line anymore. I have to be the lawyer, because for every Rosa Parks, there was a Fred Gray. Fred Gray had to be the one getting her out of prison or out of jail, or Martin King out of jail. That's me now, right? So I'm not Rosa no more. I'm Fred Gray. And so I have to be aware of that and play my part, right? Because if I play Rosa, who's playing me? You understand what I'm saying? So being very clear about where you are now and what your part to play is now is so very crucial, so that we don't get out of alignment. And to True's analogy, I start acting like a knee. I'm not a knee, I'm an elbow. So if I start acting like a knee, the body won't work. So we have to be very clear about that. So I mean, that's how I would answer that question, Eric. But Be very clear. Do not let somebody fool you to act like this is not an overwhelming time, because it absolutely is. But what does the Bible say, Eric? He has not given us a spirit of fear, but of love, of power, and a sound mind. And some interpretations has been a sound discipline. So if we discipline ourselves and be very clear about who orders our steps, and as we move forward, we can move through this period of overwhelming times as the chaos surrounds it. We won't be succumbed by the chaos that surrounds us.
Wow, great. Thank you. Control what you can control. And if you don't, and if you do your individual part, the collective effort moves the ball forward. So
Yeah.
great perspective. Thank you. So I'm going to pause quickly for any audience questions. Does anyone have a question? If you could just raise your hand, I'll let you come off mute and share your question. There was one that I saw in the chat, and I'm not sure. I'll let anyone who wants to on the panel take it. There was a discussion about your finances, and so what does the panel think about allowing your finance and investments to track your values? Is there an example or case study, or there's a suggestion around how someone could do that?
I could jump in. I mean, the clearest example of is like we've been talking about before about what happened to Target. Target did X, we did Y. Boom, boom. You know, we have a history in this country of boycotts. But if you do it effectively, collectively, and be very clear that it's not going to be a 1 day boycott. I don't like those. Some people like them. I don't, because 1 day boycott, a company will absorb that and keep it pushing. Um, the Montgomery bus boycott was 381 days. So if you're going to do it, make sure that we're clear about we're doing it for the long haul. But yeah, absolutely. Brian has said this over and over again today. Where you invest your money says a lot about what is of your importance. So if you withhold your money, people pay attention to that. And you invest your money for some people can be finite. There are some people that have it and that will have it for generations, but around my way, money is finite. So you want to invest your money where you're where you deem important. So it can be very important, but you have to do it in a strategic way. You can't just be like, oh, I want to do like, what is your goal here? And that needs to be very clear up front. So that when it gets a little bit hard and you can't really find your beauty supplies because you usually go to Target to get them, you should have figured out where to go get them before you started the boycott. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah.
Great, great. Thank you, Kayla. Leanna, I see you have your hand up. Please go ahead with your question.
Let me unmute. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for taking your time to be here. Okay. One question that I have, it's kind of a question, it's also some comments. What are y'all's thoughts about uh, people in your sphere, specifically the Black people, who are under the notion of when it comes to everything that's going on in the community. I am from Minneapolis as well. But when there's so much going on in the community, so much going on in the nation, and, that aren't small things, what are your feelings on people that are like, this ain't our fight? This ain't our fight. Where were people at when we were fighting and things like that? Because for me, that's not my view. Like for me, this is no, this is all of our fight, right? Because they're not going to stop at our Latin, brothers and sisters. They're going to continue, right? So this is for all of us to be in. So I'm kind of wondering what your thoughts are to that, and what do you say to people who are in that mindset?
Yeah, I can jump in real quick, and I'll say this, Leanna. First of all, thank you for the question. It's a great question. For me, in terms of just these one-to-one engagements, I always like to try to enter into these conversations from a place of curiosity versus confrontation first. And so oftentimes, there's a lot of different reasons as to why people are saying that, but I would love to kind of, instead of assuming that person has the reason that's kind of taking shape in the masses, I would like to just continue to probe and ask questions to find out, where are they? I think right now collectively there's a lot of people that are in a space of survival. And what I mean by that is that when they look at, for example, the things that took place in Minneapolis, and they see a young VA white male I nurse, emergency room nurse gets shot, and then they see a young female white get shot. A lot of African American young men and women are saying, okay, well, I know I don't need to be out there because that could mean trouble, right? If they're shooting this white male, they're shooting this white female, then what does that say about my role in my value in the ongoing struggle? So a lot of people are stepping out of just a act of survival, but digging into the curiosity or digging in curiously may not just simply confront them in terms of, hey, you need to be involved in this fight, but here's some ways in which maybe you don't feel like you can be a part of this, but here's some opportunities where you can be a part. Maybe you can't plug in here. Maybe you're not going to be the foot here, but you can be the hand over here. So I think just kind of entering that space with curiosity allows us to have the kind of dialogue that gives people some on ramps as to opportunities that they can be plugged into the work.
Great. Thanks, Brian, and thanks for the question. We're going to do a close, a formal close, and then several of the panelists have agreed to stay on. So if you have questions, you want to stay in a few minutes after the close, you can do that. But I want to do a formal close, and for those who are going to have to drop off. First, I want to thank our amazing panel for sharing their passion, insights, expertise, and call to actions with our community. So thank you, and thank you for giving up your time to stay over a few minutes as well. And so I can spell, so those extra A's and Z's are there on purpose. And I did this in anticipation of what I saw, and it's definitely a accurate reflection of what happened during today's session. So I really appreciate it. All right, so a call to action for attendees. What is one action you will commit to taking in the next 30 days that honors our legacy and builds upon it? And feel free to drop those in the chat so we can hold you, so your community, your TCMAN community can hold you accountable for that as we reconnect in future sessions. And if you want to watch the recording of this video or other videos in our library, you click at this QR code. It'll take you to our TC Band, the channel YouTube site. But I am legally obligated to end our session this way because I don't want to go to jail as a Black person. Please enjoy.
I like this part right here. Come on. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of a new day begun. Let us march on till victory is won. Now we add a little something to it, just to encourage you. We're gonna take you to church later. Let's go. We'll keep marching, fighting till the victory is won. To all my brothers out there, hold your head up, brothers, till the victory is won. To all my sisters in the struggle, keep believing, sister, till the victory is won. Till that day, hey, let us march on to victory. Till victory is won.
Thank you. That was the most powerful rendition of that song I've ever heard in my life. I found it last night. I'm like, I am using it. So there you go. So we currently have, let's see what we have on the line here. We have 21 people still there. True, I had a question for you myself. We didn't get to it during the session, but it was one of the ones that was prepared. And I've gotten this in various different forms and discussions, but what distinguishes authentic support from performative support? So what's true allyship? And how do we identify it, and how do we find it? What do we do when it's not there? What's your thought in that space?
Yeah, for me, when I think of authentic, right, versus performative, to me, the word care really comes to mind when I think of doing something in an authentic way and for the right reasons. Um, I don't know if you've heard me share this before, Eric. I know we've talked quite a bit, but when I think of effective leadership or great leadership, right? Good leadership versus great leadership. I think of what I call the 5 C's of competence, confidence, commitment, consistency, and care, right? And it's that care attribute that is the difference maker. Because when you really care about the people that you are serving, then you're showing up for the right reasons, and it shows in how you show up, where you show up, when you show up, and the way that you serve those people. But when it's performative, you're doing it for your own benefit. I think when it's authentic, the question you really have, I think you ask yourself, you naturally ask yourself, is how is this going to help elevate the lives of the people that I'm serving? And then that is naturally transitions to the impact that you're able to make and how you show up. I think when it's performative, the question that comes to mind is how is this going to make me look? Right? Am I showing up whether or not the cameras are there or not? Or am I only showing up if the cameras are going to be there for a photo op? And one story for me personally that comes to mind is when I first started speaking, when I very first started speaking years ago, I really had the mindset of, man, when I hit this stage, I'm going to impress this audience. And it didn't go as well as I thought it would go. And it wasn't until I had the heart change of understanding that no, the question I should be asking is how am I going to impact this audience, not how am I going to impress the audience? Because when I sought out to impress the audience, it was everything about me. How do I look? How are they going to receive me? How knowledgeable are they going to believe I am? All of those things. But when I sought out to impress the audience, it was really, I mean, impact the audience. It was really about what do they need the most? What can I do or say to truly meet them where they are that's going to help give them the things that they need, right? And so I think the word that comes to mind to me is really that care attribute. You have to really care about the people in the cause.
Great, thanks, Drew. If there are no other questions, I had one while the group is thinking of other questions. This is one that I sent out. Who's your Black History Month hero or shero, and how are you living into their legacy today? Keela, do you have a thought on that?
Why do I have to go first? I, there's so
I can
many.
go first if you want.
Yeah, please, please. It's not that I haven't thought about it, but there's so many. I have not narrowed it. So yeah, go ahead, go
Yes,
first.
so for me, it's Harriet Tubman.
Mm.
And it's not just the escape, and not just the Underground Railroad and all the and her getting free and her activism, but she went back, right? She was free and she went back. I think it was 8 times, 13 times, some amount more than zero. She went back, and so that's about courageousness. It's about bravery. It's about commitment. It's about understanding that it's about more than just you. It's about your community. It's about the collective. Now, some of those are family members, but they weren't all family members, right? And so to struggle, to sacrifice, to make it out, but then to go back. And so that also has parallels around communities and who gets out of the community and then doesn't go back and help the community. And so there are parallels, but to me, it's around the courageousness, the courage, the perseverance, the struggle, and the willingness to not just do it for yourself, to bring others along.
Okay, so I'll go. Um, so I do have a lot, and depending upon the day, I would have a different person. But I today I will say, in particular, Dr. Betty Shabazz, who also happens to be a soror of mine. Um, the 21st, along with being my birthday, also happens to be the day that Dr. King was, or excuse me, um, Malcolm X was assassinated in Harlem in 1965. And Dr. Betty Shabazz was pregnant with twins at the time that her husband was shot and killed in front of her, along with her four children. And um, by all accounts, she could have retreated into herself and went home to raise her six girls, um, and said, I've had enough. Because she was a young woman at the time that Malcolm was assassinated. He was only 39. She was a little bit younger than that, I believe. But she didn't. She continued with her education. She became an activist in her own right. She developed a fantastic relationship with Mrs. Coretta King, and they continued the legacy of not only their husbands, but developed a legacy of their own of civil rights activism and activism for Black women in this nation. When by any account, she could have just said, no, I am done, and left it alone. And she would have had every right to do so with all of the terrorism that she and her husband and her family had to endure for those years in which they were trying to make this country live up to its ideals. And so um, she is a hero of mine. She's a soror of mine, and she really embodies the best of who we can be when we choose to be selfless enough to put our community and our country before our own, uh, before ourselves. So I will say Dr. Betty Shabazz.
Thanks, Keela. Brian, what are your thoughts?
I know this is gonna feel like a cop out, but you'll see, you'll hear it, and you'll realize that it's not. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And there's a reason why the my engagement in the work of racial healing in Mississippi, through the organization that I lead, Mission Mississippi. The whole framework that I address it is built off of a quote that Dr. King gave back in 1962 at Cornell University, where he said that I'm convinced that men hate each other because they fear each other. They fear each other because they don't know each other. They don't know each other because they don't communicate and talk to one another. And they don't communicate and talk to one another because they're separated from one another. And so in our work, we build off of this theory that we believe that community transformation is only possible where communities can navigate through that paradigm across difference and disagreement. And so what we say is basically when you hear King's quote, he basically says that separation to integration, or separation to shared space, is really and truly step one. So when we share space, we share schools, we share neighborhoods, we share civic clubs and organizations, we even share seats at the tables of power. That ultimately is the ground level for our progress as a beloved community. We still have to, once we share space, we still have to actually begin to share story, where that's where learning how to create space where people can have vulnerable and curious conversations that lead to knowledge and wisdom. That's that shared story piece, because King says we don't know each other because we don't talk. And so I need to know at an intimate level and beyond resumes and biographies. I need to know people. And in order to do that, I have to be able to talk to them with depth. But then after that, if I can share stories, then I can actually get overcome the trust and distrust rather that we're experiencing, where the distrust gets or the assumptions or the speculation that we have towards one another, right? The suspicions that we have towards one another gets filled out oftentimes with our media. And so because we're not talking with each other and we don't know each other, then, the local news channels or even the national news channel comes along and says, I can tell you about Keela. Just listen to me tell you everything you need to know about Keela. And thus, because we have these news channels creating these spaces of distrust, we ultimately fear one another. But if we could actually have space to dialogue, as King said, we would grow in our knowledge and grow in our trust. And that knowledge and trust would actually lead to us having a shared struggle where your passion becomes mine, your purpose becomes mine. We actually begin to navigate through these things together. And that creates a deeper love and a deeper opportunity for success that we have yet to experience. And so oftentimes when people say, hey, do we still need to work on this? I say, yeah, absolutely, because most of us are just still on level one. We're just really, kicking the dust off of this issue because we created space together. Now we have to work all the way through the paradigm that Dr. King gave us to lead to something deeper, to lead to something that's more enduring and more sustainable. So like I said, Dr. King sounds like a cop out, but it is not. It's very much at the heart of why we do what we do.
So just for the record, Dr. King is never a cop out in any circumstance. But great perspective. I think it starts with a conversation, and we're more similar than we are different. Is we take the opportunity to have the conversation. I don't think there are any other questions. So True, you get to wrap us up. Your hero or shiro.
Yeah, well, I will agree with you, Eric, that Dr. King is never a cop out because that is also my Black History Month hero, and for very good reason. He's been a inspiration of mine from a young man, and it's definitely inspired this journey that I'm on, right? And so the quote that comes to mind, and it is really has inspired even a lot of the framework that I've created for the work that I do. And he says that change is not inevitable, right? But it comes through continuous struggle. And the inference to that when he says change is not inevitable, it's the change that we seek. Because I think we all know, right? Change in and of itself is inevitable, right? Change is going to happen. But the change that we seek in the fight for justice is not inevitable. It is not just going to happen. We have to do the work to affect change, to impact change. And when he talks about it comes through continuous struggle, he's not saying that we have to put ourselves in struggle situations, right? But in an effort to reach that mountaintop, I mean, I think there's another quote that says, yeah, we all want that mountaintop experience, but the fruit is grown in the valley. And so we need the sustenance of the fruit to be in that valley experience to give us the strength that we need to get to the mountaintop. It helps build the resilience that we need and the lessons that come from the adversity that we experience in that struggle that sharpens us and strengthens us and builds us to be able to overcome the challenges and the struggles that we are definitely going to endure on our journey to the mountaintop. And that the framework that I applied just really based on that principle is vision, adversity, application, and victory. And I walk people through that vision, right? Where there's no vision, the people will perish. Dr. King talked about his dream, right? We have to start with a vision and a dream of what we want for our lives and how we want to affect the greater good, right? And then on our journey to reaching victory, getting to that mountaintop experience, it is no question that we are going to deal with some form of adversity, that struggle he talks about, right? So in this world, you will have trouble. That is a guarantee. So we're going to experience some adversity, but it's through that adversity that we get the lessons and the strength and the grit and the resilience that allows us to keep keeping on, to keep pressing on so that we do not grow weary of doing the good work because we might, maybe it's a possibility, we will reap that harvest if we do not give up. And so that's why applying the lessons from that adversity, that is the application piece of that journey. And then as long as we continue to do that, we will reach that victory season and that mountaintop experience.
Wow. So I'm telepathically and mentally dropping 3 mics for each of my panelists. So outstanding job, great expertise, great insight, great passion, great clarity, and great transparency. It's a great way to wrap up our Black History Month series. Thanks for all those who stayed on to finally watch the last portion of the session. Have a great remainder of your day. And again, this video recording will be available on our YouTube site. Have a great day, and thank you all for joining us.